What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Optimize You. We are the podcast. We're helping you be able to optimize every single area of your life, your health, your fitness, your nutrition, your mindset, your identity, literally everything that we can do to help you become that best version of yourself and constantly strive towards that on a daily basis. And so we got an awesome episode for you today. It's me and my boy Matt here, and we're doing it on momentum. Building it, how to get it back, literally everything when it comes to momentum. And so first off, what's going on, Matt? How you doing, brother?
What's up, my man? Great day today. As always, I mean, we have to remember that we are intentional with our days. And when we are, man, things are always on the bright side when you're looking through that lens and through that scope. Now, easier said than done, right? Which we'll dive into today. And I love talking about momentum, and I know you do too. We've had conversations on it before. But really excited, man. Things are going well. I'm feeling good. I'm in week 5. I'm on week 5 right now, my current cut phase, testing out my program. I like to do it a couple times a year just to kind of go in, retest it, reconfirm that it works, make any tweaks or adjustments as needed. And it allows me to create some mindset trainings for people who actually go through my program. It's a really good opportunity for when I get stuck and I lose momentum during my process. I go, oh, okay. What was the thought process to be able to move through this? It allows me to create content, kind of put myself in other people's shoes, my clients' shoes, to help them work through stuff. But yeah, man, I'm having fun right now. I'm enjoying it. The cut is not miserable. I'm actually having fun this time. I did my homework, building and boosting up my metabolism this time, and I'm feeling really good, man. How about you?
I love it, dude. That's awesome. You're fucking crushing it, getting after it. I love that you're testing out your program. I'm kind of doing the same thing right now with my mindset portion. I call the first phase of my program, I've shifted it to champion mindset. I know I've told you about that. Yeah. And so I have 7 pillars of the champion mindset, and I've been really, it's stuff that I've embodied, and I've just been working on kind of taking it to a next level. And so I definitely feel you there. And yeah, man, I've been doing good though. Golfing a little bit, kind of taking a little bit of a break from golf just because, I don't know, I get worn out sometimes from it mentally. And I just kind of needed a little bit of a break. So this week's been a little bit of a less crazy week of golf for me. But I've been doing a lot of meditation this week. So I've actually done a lot of shifts. I was on a social media hiatus. I took a break from social media for like 4.5 days. And that was amazing. And it helped me realize how much I was attached to my phone, first off, because I was like, I found myself going to my phone the first few days and I was like looking for the apps, right? I was looking for, so I could scroll through, I could get that stress relief, all that BS.
Did you just delete the apps completely?
I deleted them completely off my phone. Nice. I didn't go on it, not even on the computer. I just didn't go on them for 4.5 days. And towards the end, I didn't want to go back on them. I was just like, this is actually really nice. It's a nice breather. And so it kind of made me realize that I need to figure out a better balance with that stuff and figure out a way to almost block my day off so that I can do what I need to do and make sure I'm, showing presence and able to make an impact on social media, which is obviously a pretty big part of our jobs. We can get ourselves out there a little bit easier, and we can also impact more people's lives with some of our videos and, our live trainings in our group, all that stuff. So I think it's a big aspect, but I've just kind of realized I want to limit that scrolling as much as possible and just kind of get down to business when I'm going on there, whether I'm posting, whether I'm doing a story, whether I'm doing a live training, just kind of do what needs to be done and get off. And I've been doing the same thing with Netflix. So I kind of cut off Netflix and I'm like, you know what? It becomes a problem too quickly and it doesn't really serve me. I'm trying to do more things that serve me. So I've kind of used that time when I generally watch Netflix or TV, and I'm shifting to reading more, shifting to more meditation. I'm shifting to more things that are going to fill my cup up a little bit more and really get me into a better place. So those are some of the big updates of the week for me.
Dude, I love that. And it's like one of those things where it's so tough to do in the moment, but as soon as you feel the benefits, we were talking about stretching earlier, right? It's like not something that's fun to do. You're not going to get a quick dopamine hit out of it. But once you do it consistently and you get rid of the apps and you understand, whoa, how much time was I actually dedicating to scrolling and going on these apps mindlessly? Now, we have to do it for our job, but that I think is such a slippery slope, because we go on there. I might go on there with intention and go, okay, what am I going to post today? Let me scroll through and get some ideas. And before I know it, I'm down a fishing rabbit hole or a golfing rabbit hole that has nothing to do with what I had originally went on there. And so it could be dangerous, man. It could be very slippery. So the fact that you stuck to it, you eliminated, just kind of did a little detox and no Netflix. I actually haven't had Netflix since they got on top of, like, you know, seeing how many people are on the family account thing, like, and sharing emails and passwords. And ever since they got caught onto that, I haven't had Netflix. So that hasn't been an issue for me. But, yeah, man, I think that's a great way to detox, which actually you mentioned something, scheduling too. You're like, I wanted to make sure I scheduled and I was more productive with my day, and kind of getting down to, let me have a protocol. Let me at least have some sort of reliability going throughout the day, which kind of brings us right into our topic here, which I think is one of the ways to create momentum is by doing that, right? Especially if you're at a loss for momentum. So by you going through that, did you find yourself being able to create a little bit more momentum in areas that you wanted to?
Yeah, man, for sure. I think recently I've been trying to figure it out. You know, like everybody, I just kind of go through these roller coasters, and I've realized how much that can push me back and lose that momentum when I do have a lot more of those things that just don't really click mentally with me, which is that Netflix that just takes me out of my body, right? It takes me out of my day. Which I think there's a time and place for everything, right? I'm not trying to tell people that they shouldn't watch Netflix, they shouldn't watch TV. It's just a matter of being able to control it. You know, when you can't control it and when it becomes like a distraction from your life, that's when it starts to get into a bad place. And so that's what I've really, the scheduling of it is huge. And I've started to accomplish more momentum in figuring out how I want to live. You know, I'll be completely honest. Like recently, probably the last like 5 or 6 podcasts I've recorded, and that's between this podcast that we do. That's between my other podcast as well. I haven't felt fully like myself on there, right? There's been like that tension. I don't know if you can relate to that, like where you feel like you're tense and you're just like, I don't know why, right? I can't just be fully myself. And so that's kind of been one of my big goals, is living life to the fullest, being authentic, true to myself, trying to say what needs to be said, trying to do what needs to be done, but also just like kind of living free. You know, it sucks having that tension. And so I've been meditating for an hour a day the last 4 days and just trying to see what comes up. And, you know, I leave that in such a better state. I feel so much better. It's difficult. There's a lot of times when I'm like, fuck, like, did I set the timer? You know, this is a long time. You know, there's different things that come up, but I definitely have been able to build a lot of momentum through that. So I think that scheduling and planning is huge. And how do you use that in your day-to-day to build momentum or to get that momentum back when you lose it?
Yeah, totally. And the things that you're talking about, it's like you can build momentum in the wrong things, right? You could get a lot of momentum in stuff that doesn't necessarily serve you. So I think being first and foremost is like being self-aware of those things. Like you talked about, I like the word congruency. Like if you don't feel congruent in the things that you're doing, you don't come off as authentic, or there's maybe like some friction there. I look at that as a good indicator to be able to, like, you and I, we coach people and it's almost natural to us, right? It's second nature. We've been doing it for so long. I think the hardest person to coach in this process is ourselves. And so I've been trying to personally get better at like, okay, and I tell my clients to do this too, but it's easy for me to coach somebody else and do it. But anytime I got to coach myself, I get challenged. So I'm like, okay, if I feel friction in some area where I want to create more momentum, let me take a step outside of myself and let me coach myself. Like if I were my own client right now, like what advice would I give to myself? And it allows me to kind of detach emotionally. And then that way I can give myself good, honest feedback without being in my body, if that makes sense. If you can find a way to like almost put on a different hat and like maybe even call yourself a different name, or like have this alter ego where you can step outside and be like, if this person was my actual client right now, and I wanted to serve them as best as I possibly could, like what would my feedback be to that person? And I've been trying to do that more and more with myself. And it's awesome because it takes the blinders off. It takes any bias off. Like obviously you're still yourself coaching yourself, but our mind is so powerful and so strong. And anytime I have an opportunity to do that, I found it so powerful because it literally gives me answers that are black and white. And I go, oh, yep, that's exactly what I was doing. Versus when you're in the moment, you're just going through, you're getting hypnotized by so many distractions. Marketing is getting better and better each and every single year. So if it's social media, if it's Netflix, like there's going to be so much stuff that attract us out there. And then obviously, as we're watching more of those things that are attractive to us, we pick momentum up in those things. They start to show us more of it. And it's really hard to pull yourself out. So the fact that you kind of went through like a little detox is like really inspiring, dude, because I found myself doing the same thing. We all do. And I always envision this as like, if you ever go to the aquarium and you see like the bait fish or the sardines just all swimming in the same circle, they're all going the same way. But every once in a while, you'll see like a sardine or a bait fish swimming the opposite way, or they're kind of just like a strap. There's only like one or two. And I find myself when I'm in the motions of those things with like social media or doing things and I have huge momentum, but it's things that don't serve me. I'm like, oh man, I need to be that sardine. I need to go against the grain right here. Anytime I find myself doing what everybody else is doing or what the majority is doing, which is the easy thing to do, I'm like, man, I'm not uncomfortable enough in this situation. Like there's something not congruent here. And it just kind of, it sets this alarm off in my head to where I'm like, man, I need to do something different. Let me step outside of myself. Let me coach myself right now in the moment. What would my feedback be to myself if I were my own client? And then 9 times out of 10, I get my answers. And then that way I have something to act on. Back to your point, I can now create more of a structure and schedule. And I found that when I block certain things out, shout out to one of our coaches, Mike Milner. He wrote an email today that was really talking about if you're not setting aside X amount of time and like blocking it out to do the things that you know move the needle for you, you're just kind of keeping your fingers crossed and just like hoping these things happen, which, you know, sparingly they will. But if you're not dedicating specific time to those things, it's almost like we're cutting ourselves short and we're just kind of keeping our fingers crossed like, man, I hope I can get to that destination and do it like in a spotty way. Versus, man, you can really start to create momentum if you're intentional about blocking things out. And so that's what I've been trying to focus on more, is like when I feel myself getting sucked into those and I'm swimming with with the crowd and I'm going with the group and I'm going with the flow of everybody in society. It's like, oh, wait, hold on. Like you're getting sucked in just like everybody else is. Are you really doing things that serve you, that serve yourself, that are giving you closer to the vision that you have, that vision that when you sit by yourself and you close your eyes and you can picture it, touch it, feel it, smell it, like, am I doing things that are conducive towards that? Or am I just going through the motions? Am I one of those sardines in that huge cyclone, everybody swimming in the same direction? So I've been trying to have more self-awareness. I think the self-awareness piece can really, really create some huge strides in the right direction in terms of as far as momentum's concerned.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's a good point. And, you know, I think that's probably the best skill that people can develop, right? Is that self-awareness. It's going to help you identify problems, just like we both have. We've identified different situations in our life that maybe are pulling us back. They're anchoring us down. They're making us getting to where we want to be harder, right? And so I think that that's a huge thing. And then you talked about like visualization, right? And I think that's a huge thing that can help build momentum as well, is because I think it helps you get more clarity on what you want. And somebody might be saying like, I can't see it, right? Like, and I do struggle with that too, where I close my eyes and like, it's tough to see some of the things, but you just got to practice over and over again. And what I like to do is set aside at least 10, 15 minutes every morning to look at my dream outcomes, right? To visualize myself living out the dream outcomes, and also visualize, you know, the step below that, right? It's like, okay, the stepping stones below that, all the way back to what am I doing today? What am I doing this week? How am I living? How am I showing up? Like, how am I having conversations with people? How am I recording this podcast? And I found that helps build momentum because you already see yourself doing it. It inspires action. And for me, it really stacks wins in the morning. You know, I like to set up certain things in my morning that can really get me going in the right direction. And, you know, I think that we think of a lot of times momentum as like this thing that happens throughout the week or the month or whatever, right? Like it's this thing, but I think that we can have it just throughout portions of the day too. Like if we can build momentum early, That's why I used to wake up and the first thing that I would do is like go to my to-do list, right? Or go to these worries or go to the thing that, I'm frustrated about that happened earlier in the week, right? And these things don't really serve us. That gratitude that we talk about so much on this podcast, going to that, going to breath work or meditation, going to visualization, having a walk, a workout, drinking some water, getting a good meal in. And I'm not saying you have to do all these things, but like these simple things, they are going to cater to you, whatever you find works best for you to get you in the best headspace, what works best for you to get you feeling your best and growing so that you can step into whatever job you have that day and you can hit the ground running is so huge. Because then we build momentum in one area, and generally that builds in other areas, right? If we can stack wins somewhere, then we're stacking wins everywhere is my thought process there. So like how do you kind of go about just the daily activities and different things that maybe you put in place to build momentum within like early in the day, middle of the day, different parts of the day?
Yeah, I think being aware of where your energy is being distributed is so crucial. We always talk about filling our own cup, right? Or maybe you're not filling your cup. Maybe you're filling somebody else's cup, or your worry cup, or your self-limiting belief cup, or things that are, let's call them on the negative side. And I think being able to be hyper aware of where your energy is being distributed on a day-to-day basis, even especially the first part of the day. If you're waking up and like you said, you're going straight to a to-do list and you're worried about, man, that meeting that I have later, I don't want to talk to that person. I don't, and you start filling it, your energy starts being distributed and poured, and that stream is all going on the negative side. It becomes very difficult. You start making that pitcher that you're filling up a lot heavy. I think Ed Milet used it as like you're carrying around a suitcase filled with cement. And it's like all these old things that are just negative, limiting, don't serve you. And it's like, you got to ask yourself, how long are you willing to carry around this cement suitcase that doesn't serve you, right? At what point are you going to not only lighten the load, but are you going to let it go? And being able to do that is difficult, right? It's like, again, we come back to self-awareness, but I look at it like this, is like a stream or a waterfall that's going to be constantly flowing no matter what. And at any point, you can change the direction at which it goes. So it's not that like the stream all of a sudden just stops, right? So if you're completely flooding on the negative side, it doesn't just stop, but you can slowly start to pivot it and transition it to, okay, let me serve my purpose better over here with things that fill myself with positive. Let me think about, instead of going, dang, I don't want to do that meeting later, or I don't like to talk to that person, or anytime I'm around them, it's just a bad negative vibe. You can immediately shift your energy in that exact moment by being aware of it and going, okay, I know what I don't want, but let me figure out what I do want. And once you can get your mind and your wavelength on and congruent with that, you're going to start to feel better. You're going to start to notice your energy goes up, your body language, the people that you talk to or enjoy talking to are actually going to start to gravitate more towards you, right? Because you're giving off that sort of energy. You're giving off that vibe. So like attracts like. So if you're thinking negative, damn, this person sucks, you're going to walk around in a shitty mood. And guess what? You're going to attract people that are just like that too. And it goes the other way too. You're in a positive mood. You're in an upbeat. People compliment you like, man, he's always in a good mood, or, you always got good vibes about you, or, you always got good positive things to say. And guess what? You attract more of those people. More of those people want to be around you. So I think like attracts like. I think being super hyper aware of where is your stream dumping into right now, especially like you said, to mention right away, first thing in the first part of the day, because here's what happens is we get up, we might have a negative thought and we try to do some sort of quick fix and we scroll social media, which is filled with who knows what, right? And so now you're filling that up. You're almost opening the floodgates to that side, right? To that side of the stream versus going, oh, hold on, before I do that, let me assess and see where my energy is going right now. Am I dumping it on this side? Am I dumping it on that side? Because at any point in time, in a second, we have the opportunity to be able to shift and change it. And so I think just being aware of that, that's something that I practice more on. What's something that you do that you either recognize your momentum and where the place that it's at, and maybe you have the ability to change it or not change it. But how do you realize, like, when you're like, oh man, like the social media, for example, how'd you realize that that was something that wasn't serving you?
I think that I realize it a lot quicker now than I used to. Like I used to, and I think anything kind of goes back to self-awareness, right? Like right away, it maybe takes you longer to figure out that you're drifting back towards some of those old patterns, those things that maybe show up in your life that aren't serving you. I think it helps people potentially to just list those things out, right? List out the things in your life that maybe detract from the direction you want to go, right? They pull your energy away. We all know them, right? Like, it's not necessarily a surprise that Netflix does it for you, or that social media does it for you, or all these things, but it comes down to the dose, right? It's about controlling the dose. And for me, I just think the reason why I'm able to figure it out and change is because I know that they're problems. And I know that they're a struggle. I'm aware to the fact that they can become issues. And I'm also aware to the fact of my personality being one that I get sucked into shit. Like, I can, have addictive personality. I'm somebody who's been addicted to many things over the years, and I understand that aspect of it. So when I start drifting into it and it gets to that point where it's, maybe I feel myself mentally taking a turn, or I'm like, oh shit, like, I'm dreaming about this show, or, it's turning into 2-3 times. And then on the weekends, like, I find myself wanting to fill those gaps with Netflix or with TV or with scrolling. Once I kind of get to that point where I don't feel like I'm present anymore, that's where it really starts to be something where I catch myself. Right. And so, like, it's different now though. Like, sometimes I'll catch myself really early where I'll be like, oh shit, I'm doing it. Right. And then other times it takes me a week or two to get there, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm doing it. But I don't get so far away anymore that I can't revert it very quickly and be like, okay, let's take a break. Let's put a cap on this, like amount of time I can watch Netflix a week or per day, or, let's find a replacement habit, which is what I've been doing right now with my reading and with my meditation. Because I think that a thing that a lot of people struggle with is they don't find the replacement. They don't have something that they can input in for these things that aren't serving you. Because I do believe that this is a huge aspect to momentum, is taking away the anchors, taking away the suitcases, right? Like you said, the suitcase is full of cement. If you can find these things, which it's really as simple as just writing them down, maybe you're somebody who you get sucked into certain foods that take away from your confidence, that take away from how you feel, that take away from your energy the next day, that kind of, build you away from your goals. That could be something on your list. If you're like me and it's Netflix, if you're like me and it's social media, I think a lot of people struggle with these similar type things. And there's generally no surprises. It's the same shit that keeps coming up in your life, right? What can we do to replace those other things? What can we do to have a time limit on these things, or to have certain days or parts of the day that you allow yourself to go into them? It can be a different thing, or a tough thing for people. But if you truly care about the goals that you're going after and the people in your life that are affected by these goals, then you will do whatever it takes. I think that's why me and you we're so obsessed with growth and getting better and becoming a better version of ourselves, because I'm assuming we've both had these times where just life kind of sucked and we didn't really know exactly what to do, kind of lost. I know I go through those moments, and they're all good growth periods for me to figure out, okay, well, what do I have to do to get better? And then every time you kind of get a little bit more knowledgeable on yourself, you get a better relationship with yourself, and you understand a little bit more about what it takes for you to really get fully into, better behind, or maybe a better way to put it is you figure out a way to kind of get some of these things behind you a little bit farther, right? Because sometimes they keep peeking their head in, and, I don't know, man, I'm just kind of sick of my own shit at certain points, right? And
Yeah,
it's like, I'm like, you know what, dude, like, I'm done with this shit. Like, I need to figure out a way to get past it. And so,
yeah.
I don't remember what the fucking initial question was really, but
I don't either, dude. But you brought up some great points. I love how you brought up, you're like, I am using habits you took it to your advantage, right? You're like, okay, if this thing is occurring right now and I don't want it to occur, I want to put a cog in the system here and just kind of redirect it. You actually replace it with a habit that's more beneficial for you. So you're actually using what we do as human natures, we get sucked into things really simple and really easy. You're like, hey, why not take that thing that I'm already getting sucked into and doing that doesn't serve me and just replace it? And when you use that to your advantage, you can use that stream. And like we were talking about, you're just kind of putting like your own dam in there and just redirecting the stream versus going like, oh, I got to go find a whole nother stream, or let me just keep going and flowing in this direction. It doesn't quite serve me. You're like, no, let me take advantage of this opportunity, which again, you have to be self-aware that that opportunity is even there, or else you're just a sardine swimming with the crowd, going with the flow, going with everybody else. So I think that portion and that idea behind it is huge, being able to plug in a habit that is serving you, because you can still use that momentum, but you just shift it a little bit, right? You shift it to something that's actually gonna, I always like to use the argument of like, make sure your ladder's on the right building. And all of a sudden, if you find you're climbing up and it's not on the right building, all you're doing is going, oh, let me just reassess. Let me put my ladder back on the right building. This is the thing that serves me. Like as uncomfortable as this shift might be right now, I'm going to go ahead and do it because I know in the long term, I'm going to be better off for it. And I think that's huge. And you said you're getting better at it. And again, to remind you guys, this is a skill. Like Alex and I are by far not even close to being perfect at this, but we get better and better at it is because we are more aware of when it happens versus you're going to look at the 99%. I just looked up a stat while you were talking. I forgot what the percentage was. I knew it was in the 90s, but it says current scientific estimates that there are 95% of our brain's activity is unconscious, right? So a lot of times you don't even know. That's our subconscious mind. Our brain is just like a computer chip. It has a certain developed loading of hardware in there that it's just going to keep on repeat, regardless if it's good or not for us. So that's kind of like our autopilot throughout the day. The more awareness that you have to be able to acknowledge that and control your thoughts where they're going. Remember, we always have that opportunity to control them. I think people forget that and they just go, oh, well, I'm just going to write this off. It is the way that it is, right? This is how it is. Like, woe is me, and have a victim mentality. It's going to be very difficult for you to change if you think that way. It's going to be very difficult for you to build a momentum in the direction we know you're capable of if you continue to think that way. So being able to understand, well, if 95% of our thoughts are just on autopilot, what about that other 5%? That's that 5% that we're actually conscious of. Are you even using that 5%? I think some people are walking around at 100%, right? Like, again, those are probably averages. So I'm going to say the average is 95. And the only reason it's a 95 is because there's a very select few who actually remember that they're in control and they can deviate their momentum in a split second if they choose to. So I think that's huge, man. I think if you look at like people who are very skilled in something, it doesn't matter what it is. It's almost like eerie to me how cool and confident they are at whatever it is that they do. Like you and I played baseball. You look at those guys at the highest level, like look at how they warm up, look at their body language, look at how they carry themselves. Look at somebody, let's use a fitness example. Let's look at somebody who is brand new to weightlifting. Let's take a guy, for example, 9 times out of 10, let's say if they were a former athlete and they're trying to come into the gym, they got out of shape after their sport and they're trying to get into things and improve their health. When they go back in, there's going to be a lot of ego there. They're going to lift super aggressively. They're going to probably be flexing in the mirror. They're going to be looking around and so concerned about whoever is looking at them. All those things don't necessarily serve them, right? And so they're in this position of, man, I got all this built up momentum that is more so driven and buried in my ego, not necessarily serving me and improving my health and my fitness, because I'm more so concerned about what everybody else is thinking versus improving myself right now. And if you look at anybody who's experienced or has a high level of skill, again, they have this eerie, cool calmness about them. And 9 times out of 10, if you walk up to those people in the gym, they're the nicest people because they've been in your scenario, they've been in your situation. They have a calmness, a cool, calm demeanor about them, and they're willing to help. 9 times out of 10, of course, you're going to have your bad apples. But if you see the guy in there that's crazy, that's out of control, that's lifting too much weight for himself, that's a very low skill. They have very low repetition. Their experience is very low, and they're just screaming with their actions like, hey, I have momentum, but it's in the opposite direction. It's not quite advanced yet. I haven't developed that skill. And so they're not fooling anybody. They're fooling themselves. And you can take that. I'm just using a gym example, but you can take that in any scenario. If you see somebody, if we go back to baseball, you see somebody who is inexperienced hitting a round ball with a round bat. 9 times out of 10, they're going to be swinging out of their shoes, right? Not even close. Or they start to get a little momentum, their confidence starts to build, and they're still trying to swing as hard as they can. You watch a professional hit, it just looks like fluid. It's smooth. It's calm. They've been there so many times, more times than you've even tried to attempt. They've failed more times, right? Like, so that's what we're talking about in terms of developing this as a skill. I think if you look at it like that and go, okay, I'm never going to be perfect at it, but to what degree am I increasing? Because to your point, when you wake up first thing in the morning, you can nip it right away. You can self-assess right away. Are you going to let this whole day drag out, or are you going to win right now in increments, little small increments that you can stack wins throughout the day? And when you can do that, you've already developed a skill. You're now no longer that 95% that's going through the motions. You're conscious, you're aware, you're intentional with what you're doing about your day. And I promise you, watch your day start. You're going to go about your day a lot differently than if you were to just kind of float as a sardine and do what the 95% does. I did have a question on something that you asked too. What does good momentum look like for somebody who's just getting started? Like, what would your advice be to that person?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people go wrong there because they try to build momentum so quickly when really all you got to do is do one thing, right? I have a great thing that I use that I got from a guy named David Nurse. He's like a mindset coach. He works with a lot of big time basketball players, right? Like all-star basketball players, helps them with their mindset, helps them get to the next level. And I was at a place where he was talking, and he gave this little simplest thing called daily tallies, where you literally, it's just a thing. I've been doing it ever since I saw him. Every day that I move the needle forward, take one step in the direction of my goals, I do a tally, right? And it's more of that confidence. It's like more of a confidence or momentum builder, right? The more things we can have out there that show us that we're building momentum, that show us that we're following through on our word, that we're keeping the promises, the better. And so I would say, for somebody who is new and is like, what does good momentum look like? It looks like you just taking one step forward every day. It looks like you doing one fucking thing every day to go a little bit closer to that dream outcome. And I think that once you understand that, and once you understand that you want to stack those wins and that you don't need to do a million things today, you just got to do one thing. And if you can do one thing for 2 weeks and then you add another thing to the mix, and then you're doing two things and then you add another thing to the mix, like, you're going to be able to get to where you want to be. But if you try to do 5 things today, you might build momentum for 3 days, but then you're going to stop, you're going to fall off. And so I would come back to figuring out what promises can you keep to yourself today, committing to keeping them, and then like just striving every day to follow through on that word and be able to mark that tally at the end of the day, saying that you did what you said you were going to do. And guess what? Like, as you keep going and you go through the months, you're going to be able to keep bigger promises to yourself. But you can't start by trying to keep these huge promises, because it just doesn't work very long. And that's why a lot of people end up falling off whatever they do. Another thing that I use personally is called the Power List. I think I've talked about it on here a little bit, but Andy Frisella he's the guy who, I don't know if he created it, but he's been huge on it for years and years and years. And I've been using it for at least the last year. And it is huge. Just your 5 essential tasks for the day, not bullshit tasks, like 5 essential needle moving tasks that are going to, move you in the direction of your goals, right? Things that are, taking you steps closer. And maybe you start with 3 things, right? Like, you don't have to start with 5, but I do 5, and it is essential for me to keep those promises. When I put something on the list, it's me basically cementing to myself that I'm going to do that thing. But that didn't happen overnight, right? I've definitely not kept those promises sometimes, but I'll be honest with you, Matt, I can't look back the last 2, 3, 4 months and remember a day where I didn't keep those promises to myself. Now, there's been times where I didn't have as much intention, which I wasn't always proud about, but I caught that pretty quickly and I was able to revert that, which I think is another good thing that we could talk about when it comes to building momentum. You're not building fucking momentum if you're not intentional about the things you're doing, right? Checking boxes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Alex, you're starting with 5. You recommended some people can start with 3, right?
Yeah.
I think it just comes down to keep the shit simple, folks. Like I always say, start sloppy. That's my saying. And I really, truly stick to that. And I mean that because I live it every single day. There's days where I don't feel like doing shit. But if I made my power list, I wrote those 5 things down, you better know for damn sure, if I want my belief in self and my self-confidence to keep going up, even if it's small, despite it being small, I got to get some momentum on my side. And the way I do that is whatever those 5 things are, good, bad, ugly, you got to be able to do them. Let's say, for example, one of those things is running. Maybe you are like, damn, I set a goal for myself to run 2 miles today. The most I've run in the last 6 months was maybe a mile. Maybe you might have stretched that one a little too far. But I look at it like this. You might be coming up with excuses or procrastinating to be able to get that one thing done. You might be like, damn, I don't have the right shoes. It's shitty weather out today. Or man, I waited too long and now it's scorching outside. It's going to be super hot. You're thinking of all the reasons of why not to versus going, damn, you know what? I got a hole in this shoe, but I don't care. I'm going to put them on and I'm going to go and I'm going to start sloppy. And if you just get moving, before you know it, you're 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes into this thing, and you got over that initial hump of friction. I think that's a lot of big time thing that holds people back, is that initial hump to get started. So if you can just get started, we were talking about it today. It was like one of the things that Alex and I both have friction on or resistance to is stretching. We know that obviously as coaches, we know like the benefits from stretching are huge, are instrumental, especially in longevity, pliability. I mean, you name it, right? The list goes on. But actually just getting started for me is the hardest thing. So one thing I did was, I told Alex before, I set a 5-minute timer and I do it immediately after my workout. And it's my buyout to be able to get out of the gym. If I don't do those at least a minimum of 5 minutes and I set a timer, I can't get my ass out of the gym yet. So it's my ticket out. It's how I punch my ticket out. And since I've been doing that, to Alex's point, I created a habit that was congruent with something that I was already doing consistently, which was working out, but I was missing the stretching side of it. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to just pair it with that. And I'm going to put a timing aspect to it. If I do it for a minimum of 5 minutes, great. I can get out, I can go about my day, I can feel accomplished, and I've ticked the mark of creating momentum in that aspect for myself. Now, 9 times out of 10, I'll go longer than 5 minutes because I've only stretched one side of my body, right? I'm just not going to leave it unbalanced. So I'll do the other side, but it got me started. It created this frictionless scenario for me. So I'm like, okay, I could do 5 minutes. Like 5 minutes is easy. I'm already sweaty. I just did my workout. Like, what's it going to hurt an extra 5 minutes to get out of here, right? I just cleaned up equipment. I'm kind of hanging out anyways. Like I can take 5 minutes and stretch. And before you know it, that becomes second nature. That's habit. And then you do it consistently over an extended period of time. Alex mentioned a 2 to 3 month period where he can look back, where he's been kind of lights out with his power list. All of a sudden, those 2 to 3 months turn into 6 months, which turns into a year. And that lack of confidence that you once had, you're building tallies in the other direction. Despite them being small, man, you can move mountains. I think the smaller, the better, actually, because it's going to create more consistency. And consistently good is better than occasionally great every single day. You might have those days where you're phenomenal and you're hitting it out of the park. You're hitting grand slams. Great. But we need to lay it down some bunts. We need to hit some singles. We need to get people on base, right? We need some walks. So those are going to go much further. They're going to set you up for success. Keep chipping away at that mentality. And I think it's a great practice to have, man.
Yeah, dude. And really, using how things make you feel to help you build it as well, right? Like you were talking about how the stretching, I mean, you start to feel so much better as you do it. It starts to cement that in a lot more, that's something you should do more of, right? But right away, you see it as an inconvenience. You see the resistance. You don't see the positive things of it until you start to actually, ingrain that habit a little bit more. And so that can go in both directions, right? A lot of times we'll do things that feel good in the moment that don't move us forward. If we can kind of see that bigger loss or that bigger benefit that is attached to some of these things, then it starts to get easier to build the momentum. Because like for me, you were talking a little bit earlier about awareness as well. And, the best way I think to build it is, first off, just trying to be more present and try to pick apart your thoughts. But for me, it's meditation. I was talking about how I've been doing hour meditations every day, and that makes me feel so much better because it's such an uncomfortably long period of time to be sitting there by yourself. And so there's going to be a lot of thoughts that come up. And so I'm starting to figure things out, and I'm starting to pick apart different thoughts. I'm starting to, see a little bit more about how I think and how I'm thinking right now. And then also like good ideas come up, like different things that I'm working through. I had something this morning come up where it was around attachment and how, and this actually plays into what you're talking about with people, excuses, thoughts, right? A lot of times we buy in and we attach to our thoughts, we attach to our feelings, we attach to people in our life that, the opinions of people, we attach to our money, we attach to our things that we have, like all of these things. And when we attach to things, they have power over us, right? A lot of times, like if something has power over us, it is owning us instead of us owning it. And so if we can really learn to figure out these things and understand that, when I am attached to this thing, like it doesn't necessarily lead to very good results, then we can also start to really pull away and start to actually move in the direction and a lot more free, because I know like for me, when I have that attachment to like, oh, what is this person going to think about when I do this? Or, for me, I've been doing 3 conversations a day with strangers and just kind of facing that fear. And not every day is it easy for me to go up and talk to these people and start these conversations, right? I have these thoughts in my mind about how it's going to go, about how this person's not going to like me. But then sometimes I pull myself away from that attachment. I'm like, this makes absolutely no sense. Like I can do whatever the fuck I want to do, right? Yeah. Like I can go up and talk to this person and do whatever I want. And I don't know, like sometimes just getting ourselves out of that and being able to detach and let go from some of these things that we think we need to be so close to can really help us move forward. And I think that also helps us build that momentum too.
Dude, I got a question for you. You talked about momentum with meditation. Like how, if somebody's just getting into that, selfishly, I would like to know, because we know the benefits of it. It's more difficult to practice. If you've ever tried it, and you guys are listening, if you haven't tried it, I highly recommend doing it. But your first couple times you try it, you're going to notice it's hard. You're going to look for your phone. There's going to be distractions. You're going to be like, oh, this is uncomfortable. I don't want some of these thoughts to come up. Or you're just going to look for something to be distracted. So how do you create momentum with your meditation?
Yeah. For me, so first off, I probably wouldn't recommend going to an hour right away. That is a long period of time. But, starting with 5, 10, 15 minutes, building up from there, really, it's a commitment, right? Like set the timer on your phone and then commit that you're not going to check your phone. You're not going to open your eyes. You're not going to do anything. You're going to sit there. You're going to breathe. You're going to just be aware, see what comes in. Try to, I kind of just try to like focus on my breath, but there'll be different thoughts that drag me away for 30 seconds. And then I'm like, okay, kind of center myself back, go through. Sometimes I'll have meditations where I just kind of like have more of an intention of, sitting with something. Right. And so I think it's just a matter of commitment, which really comes down to anything, right? We talked about promises, keeping them to yourself. That's a commitment, right? It's not something that it has to be super complicated. It's a mindset in itself, right? I'm going to do whatever it takes today to get this stuff done. I get it, but I don't get it when people can't necessarily follow through on that, right? Because I used to struggle a little bit with it, but now coming from a place of it doesn't have to be that hard, right? It can just be these simple things that you do to build that momentum. That it doesn't have to be a lot of things, but if you constantly let yourself down, you look back 6 months, a year later, and you are a completely different person in the wrong direction. But if you get in the habit of being the person that's never going to let yourself down, you start to build a lot of trust with yourself. You build a lot of confidence in that same 6 months, a year later, you're a completely different person in the right direction. Right. So I think that that's probably, if I were to say anything today of like the best thing you can possibly do, it's that you can make that commitment today that you're going to always follow through on the promises that you make to yourself, whether you're tired, whether you're unmotivated, whether something shitty happened in your life that day. I think there's probably certain things that come up that maybe, they're worthy, right? Like there's very few things. But I'll be honest with you, like, I could have some super shitty things happen in my life and there's going to be, I'm still going to keep these promises because I know how important they are. And I want to make sure that, not even just for myself, but for other people, my clients, you, Nick, all of the, the people that I got to show up for, on a weekly basis. like it's important. It's important to make sure you're coming through, because coming through for yourself is a lot harder for some people, I think. People will come through for everybody else, but then they'll neglect themselves, and then they'll wonder why they feel like shit on a regular basis. Well, it's because you're not coming through for yourself.
100%. And that's being conscious of, where are my commitments? Like, you might be something like, oh, I commit really well. But do you commit to yourself? Are you committing to the promises that you're keeping to you, not to show up for somebody else, like not to show up to your meeting at a certain time or get that assignment done on time? Like, that's great. You still want to do that. But what commitments are you keeping to yourself? And I think when you can make that shift and that transition, you start to elevate the confidence in yourself and belief. And if we take this all the way back to square one, in order for anybody to accomplish anything, the thing that's going to help you is the belief in self. If you have shitty belief, it's probably because you've set out to do these things, whether it was a New Year's resolution, whether it was a new diet, whether it was a new exercise routine, whatever it was. And at some point, that commitment that you made to yourself, you broke it. And every time you break it, you're stacking losses in the column in terms of, man, I don't believe in myself. My self-confidence goes down, because I remember when I sought out to do that and I was really gung-ho about it. I was super fired up. I had a bunch of momentum. There was people doing it with me. So I had the community and the group behind me. And then I gave up. I eventually gave up. So what's going to be different this time? And so now you start doubting yourself going into the next thing. And now you're getting burned twice by the same event that happened only one time. If you've repeated it more than one time, then you're getting burned multiple times, right? But that one event that you lost belief and you broke the commitment to yourself, you're going to be faced with a crossroads. You can either let it burn you in the future, or you can go, you know what? It's my opportunity to draw a line in the sand. This time I will commit, regardless and despite how I feel in the scenario and the situation, because it will come up to where you're going to start to second guess it. Like, why did I do this again in the first place? Today I don't feel like it. Shitty weather out today. I'm in a bad mood, right? All these things are going to come up. And despite those things, if you continue to commit to yourself, even if it's small, even if it's the smallest increment, we always talk about 1% increments, even if it's in the smallest increment you can imagine, I promise you the belief in self will rise. The discipline will rise. You'll even create your own motivation, right? People talk a lot about motivation. We talk about that one on this show too. All those things will have a higher likelihood and a higher percentage of happening and occurring when you actually commit to yourself and you don't break promises. When you said enough's enough, trust me, I'm not perfect. I break promises to myself quite a bit, but it happened so much to the point where I was pissed. I was like, I know I'm capable of more. Matt, when's the last time you're going to let this shit happen? Like, draw a line in the sand, dude. Like, you need to stop. And once it gets to that point, that's usually somebody's like trajectory. They can now accomplish something. They can go through and get through. It's people refer to it as like the valley of despair, right? Like the bottom part of the curve. I don't know if you're familiar with that at all, but the valley of despair is the most difficult part after the honeymoon phase when you start something new. When you start to go down into this bottom of the slope in the valley of despair, that's where everybody gives up. And then they look for that new initial flame, that motivation of when they first started, that New Year's resolution that was super exciting. Just because they're in the bottom part of the curve, very few people actually see it through and make it up on the other side, which is where the success is at, which is where the result, which is where the outcome is at. But a lot of times it's very difficult to make it through the valley of despair. Here's the caveat is, when you go start that new exciting thing, when you go start the thing that's fresh, that looks cool, the new diet, the new fad, guess what? You're going to face a valley of despair at some point during that new journey. Are you going to draw a line in the sand this time and decide that you're going to see it through regardless of how you feel when you're in the valley of despair, when you understand it's going to take more work than you thought, when you understand it's going to be more difficult than you might have anticipated when you first started, when it was all sunshine and rainbows? And so I encourage people, when they find that fork in the road and they come to it and they're in the valley of despair, what decision are you going to make? Are you going to make a decision to continue to break another promise for yourself? Or are you going to say, you know what? I knew this was going to happen. I've been here before. This isn't unfamiliar territory, but this time I'm going to bust my ass and work through it. And I promise you, if you do that and you take that to every single scenario that you do, I know easier said than done, but trust me, any new thing that you embark on is going to have a valley of despair. Are you going to see it through despite how you feel or not?
Yeah, man. I think that's awesome. And really, how many fucking times do you need to break promises to yourself before you're just fed up with it, right? Kind of like you. You're like, you got fed up. That's why I've been so good with not doing it for so long, is because I did it so many fucking times that I
Yeah.
was like, okay, like when are we going to be done with this shit, right? And it was just a
Dude.
decision. It was a decision after failing so many times, and that's not how it has to be for you, whoever's listening out there, right? Like whoever is listening, who's watching this, it doesn't have to be like that for you. You can commit today to being like, I'm going to be done with my own shit, right? I'm not going to make excuses, or like I'm not going to listen to that fucking part of my mind that's making excuses that's not you, right? Detach from the fucking thoughts that you have, detach from your fucking feelings, and make decisions based on your heart. Make decisions based on what's going to actually get you in the right direction. Because once you can start doing that and understanding that positive just benefit of just what we're talking about, keeping the promises and, moving in the direction, and, when you feel that resistance, being able to still push through and get it done. You do that. If you do that enough times, it becomes a lot easier, and you're like, I like this, this is good. And you understand that feeling on the other side of it is amazing when you come through on something that's hard, which is why I think it's important for people to do more hard shit during the day, doing more uncomfortable things. But that's a whole nother podcast. I think that can help people with this. You start to get tougher. You have mental toughness that you start to develop. And, because I've had plenty of times where I'm like, we don't have to do this today, right? Like, and I'm sure everybody can relate to that. One day won't hurt, right? One day won't hurt. But then when you look back, and if you can draw back on, and I would kind of leave people with this, if you can draw back on those other times when you've done that, right? Draw back on those other scenarios where you've fallen into that excuse of, oh, you know what? My spouse brought home pizza, and yeah, what's one day? Which is maybe a bad thing to say, but I think that too many people, they always fall into these things, right? It's like, well, my husband brought this home, or my wife brought this home, or, my people at work brought in a bunch of cookies, so I had to eat them. Like it's, all these things. Like, how many times are you going to fail on the things that you say you're going to do? Or how many times are you going to be like, oh, you know what? It's raining outside. I don't need to go on a walk. Like, I won't get my steps in today, other than finding a million other ways that you can get steps in, other than going on a walk outside, or just sucking it up and fucking going out into the water that is coming down from the sky. Like it's there's a lot of different things, but it comes down to drawing back on the times when you failed to come through on the self. How did that feel? Draw back on that feeling. And do you want to continually feeling that way? Or do you want to actually start to move in the direction that you are meant to move in, become a different version of yourself, become a person who is going to follow through on everything that you say you're going to do, and really start that next part of your life that is going to change everything about you and your goals.
That next part of your life that you're talking about is we always say too, is cast your vision and your focus looking forward. So anytime you're in those decisions where they're super tough to make because you don't feel like it, or you're not in the mood, right? It's chances are is because you're thinking about something that's limiting you, or thinking about something that happened previously 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years behind you, versus going, okay, if I do this today, what's that going to look like as I go forward in the next 6 months, in the next 12 months? If I were to repeat this 1,000 days in a row, this decision that I make today, would I be happy with that outcome that's going to come out on the other side, or not? And then in that moment, it'll help you make that decision when you're in the fork in the road, when you're like, oh, I know this is the thing that I should do. I just don't feel like it. I can't get myself to do it. I can't get myself to go grocery shop. I can't get myself to lay off the bagels and donuts that the people from work brought in. I can't get myself to lay off the shitty food that I get invited to for work meetings. Like, in those decisions, again, and this all depends on the skill level too. You might see somebody who's has the skill of doing it 15, 20, 25 years plus, and you see them eat a donut and they have a 6-pack, right? It's because the skill's there, the amount of repetitions that they've got, they understand how much intentional control that they have. They can have that donut and they don't let cravings take them through this huge landslide. Whereas if you're first starting out, that donut could be the beginning of a snowball effect of you gaining more weight than you even potentially started with, right? So you got to take and assess yourself of, where is my skill level? Where's my ability? Just because I'm looking at somebody that's extremely advanced in that field doesn't mean that I'm there yet. So knowing yourself and setting yourself up for success is super important. But 9 times out of 10, if you can look forward, what's the future vision look like? It'll help you make that decision when you're in the moment and that fork in the road. And I hope you going forward, man. Alex, you want to wrap us up, dude? Any more thoughts?
I don't got anything, man. I think this is a great episode. Hopefully people out there, you're listening to this, you got some good value. If you did, share it with somebody that could get some help from this, that maybe somebody who is constantly losing that momentum, maybe somebody who is falling back into old patterns, struggling. Hopefully this can help you, can help your friends, your family, all of that stuff. If you did enjoy this as well, make sure you like, you subscribe, you rate us. Like, we're on a mission to just help as many people as possible optimize their life. So we appreciate each and every one of you for watching, listening to this every week. And we hope you have a good rest of the week. And we'll be talking to you soon.
See you on the next one.